My daughter stood in front of my neighbors and said with tears in her eyes, "My mother is losing her mind. She needs help." Everyone nodded sympathetically. Then my best friend stepped forward and said, "Honey, we need to talk about what we all know." My daughter's face went white. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. My shears were in my hand, the blades closing around a dead hydrangea bloom, when I heard her voice rise over the quiet of the afternoon. The sound was a familiar one, a practiced tone of manufactured concern, but its volume and location were new. It came not from my doorway, but from the center of my own front lawn. I did not turn immediately. I finished the cut, letting the brown flower head fall into the basket at my feet. Then I straightened, the bones in my back giving a soft protest, and I looked. Vanessa stood on the emerald grass I had nurtured for 30 years. She was not alone. Mrs. Lanahan from 2 doors down was there, holding a casserole dish covered in foil. Ben Carter, walking his old Labrador, had paused at the edge of the property. The new couple, the Millers, were on the sidewalk, looking uncertain. My daughter had gathered a small, accidental audience. She wore a cream-colored blouse and tailored pants, an outfit meant to convey competent worry. Her hands were clasped in front of her. I saw her chest rise with a deliberate, shaky breath. "I just don't know what else to do," she said, her voice carrying. It was meant to carry. "I'm at my wit's end." Mrs. Lanahan made a sympathetic noise. "Is everything all right, Vanessa? Is it your mother?" Vanessa's head bowed, a gesture of profound weariness. "It's Mother. She's not well. She's not herself at all." She looked up and I saw the gleam of unshed tears in her eyes. They were real tears. Vanessa could always summon them. "I think she's losing her mind." The words hung in the warm air. The shears in my hand felt cool and solid. I remained still by the rosebed, partially obscured by the spirea bush. They had not yet seen me. Ben cleared his throat. "Eleanor? She seemed fine when I saw her at the mailboxes yesterday. Sharp as ever." "That's just it," Vanessa said, her tone turning confidential. The small group leaned in slightly. "It comes and goes. 1 minute she's perfectly normal, the next, she's accusing me of stealing from her. Last week she forgot how to use the microwave. She put a metal bowl inside it. I found it, thank God, before she turned it on." She delivered the lines with a quiet conviction. The metal bowl was a detail I appreciated. It was specific, domestic, and frightening. A lie. A complete fabrication. I had heated soup for us both in that microwave 3 days ago. Mrs. Lanahan's face creased with genuine distress. "Oh, the poor dear. And you, having to deal with this all alone." "I'm trying," Vanessa said, her voice thickening, "but it's getting worse. She wanders at night. I found her in the backyard at 2 in the morning last Tuesday, just standing there in her nightgown. She said she was looking for her mother." She pressed her fingers to her lips, containing emotion. Her mother passed in 1998. A chill moved through me, despite the sun on my shoulders. This was no simple grumbling about a forgetful parent. This was a narrative, carefully constructed. The misplaced accusations, the dangerous confusion, the nocturnal wandering, the regression to the past. She was sketching the portrait of a woman in steep, erratic decline, a woman who could not be trusted with her own stove, her own finances, her own home. "Have you seen a doctor?" the young Mrs. Miller asked, her voice hesitant. "She refuses," Vanessa sighed, a world of exhausted frustration in the word. "She gets combative, says there's nothing wrong, that I'm the one causing trouble. That's part of the paranoia. She's pushing everyone away, even Gloria." She said my best friend's name with a note of sad regret, as if Gloria had been tragically alienated by my irrational behavior. That was the moment I knew the scope of it. This was not a passing drama. This was a campaign. I watched the faces of my neighbors. Mrs. Lanahan's sympathy was deepening into worry. Ben looked troubled, glancing toward the house. The Millers wore the uncomfortable expression of people witnessing a private family tragedy spill onto a public lawn. They offered soft murmurs of support to Vanessa. "You're doing the right thing. It's so hard. She's lucky to have you." They believed her. Or they were beginning to. The performance was effective. The setting was perfect. My own well-kept yard, a symbol of stability, now the stage for its owner's unraveling. I was the unseen specter in this play, the addled mother lurking inside while the dutiful daughter bravely bore the burden. I felt a hollow open up beneath my ribs. It was not surprise. The signs had been there for months. The excessive interest in my investment statements, the pointed questions about the will during Sunday dinners, the exasperated sighs when I recounted a simple story twice. I had noted them, filed them away with a mother's reluctant heart, but I had not anticipated this boldness, this public branding. The heat of humiliation washed up my neck. It was a hot, shameful feeling to be so falsely presented before people who had known me for decades, to be painted as a feeble, paranoid ghost in my own life. The anger came next, a solid, cold column forming in my chest, pushing against the hurt. I let it settle. I did not let it show. Vanilla was in her element now, feeding on the concern. I may have to look into options for her safety. I hate the thought, but in-home care or even a facility, somewhere she can be monitored. She delivered the word facility with a delicate wince, as if the very sound pained her. That was the objective, the unveiling. It was not about my mind, it was about my house, my savings, my independence. It was about removing the obstacle that was me. I took a step then, out from behind the spirea. The movement was quiet, but Ben saw me first. His eyes widened, then flickered with immediate discomfort. The others followed his gaze. The scene froze. Vanessa, mid-sentence, saw me. A flawless, complex series of emotions flitted across her face. Shock, guilt, then a swift, overriding mask of loving concern. "Mother," she breathed, taking a step toward me. "What are you doing out here? I told you to rest." I looked at her. I looked at my neighbors. I held the gardening shears loosely at my side. My clothes were old denim and a faded cotton shirt stained with soil. I knew what they saw. A disheveled woman caught in the act of the simple, earthy task that had always grounded me, now made to look like a symptom. "The roses needed deadheading," I said. My voice was calm. It did not quaver. It was my own voice. Vanessa hurried over, her hand outstretched as if to guide a child. "Let me help you inside. It's too hot for you out here." I did not move. I looked past her to Mrs. Lanahan. "The casserole is for the church potluck on Sunday, I assume. Tell Marjorie I'll bring my potato salad." Mrs. Lanahan blinked, thrown by the normalcy. Yes, Eleanor, I will." I nodded to Ben. "Sam's hip is better, I see. He's walking without the limp." Ben patted his dog, his expression confused. Yeah, the medication helped." I had given them two facts delivered with clarity. I remembered the potluck. I had observed the dog's improvement. Small, solid stones of reality dropped into the swirling narrative Vanessa had created. I finally turned my eyes to my daughter. Her smile was strained, her hand still hovering near my arm. "You shouldn't trouble the neighbors, Mother. Come inside." "I am not troubling them," I said, my tone even. "You are speaking to them, on my lawn." I paused, letting the correction hang. "I will finish my gardening. The fresh air is good for me." I turned my back on them then. I knelt with some difficulty on the padded mat. I picked up my trowel. I began to loosen the soil around the base of the David Austin rose, my movement slow and deliberate. I could feel their eyes on my back, the neighbors uneasy, Vanessa's sharp and hot. The conversation on the lawn did not resume. After a moment, I heard murmurs, the shuffle of feet. Mrs. Lanahan made an excuse about her oven. Ben continued his walk. I did not look up. I worked the earth, the rich, dark smell of it filling my senses. I heard Vanessa's heels on the flagstone path, then the firm click of my front door closing. She had gone inside my house. She was in my kitchen, likely pouring a glass of my iced tea, waiting. The hollow feeling was gone, replaced by the cold, hard column. The performance was over. The lines were drawn in the neat lines of my lawn. She had declared me incompetent before a jury of my peers. She had chosen the battlefield. I pressed the trowel deep into the soil. A weed, stubborn and deep-rooted, needed to be removed. Not just cut from the top, but extracted fully so it could not grow back. I worked at it, carefully, methodically, until I felt the final snap of its taproot. I placed the uprooted weed into the basket with the dead blooms. The soil under my nails was a grounding brown. I brushed my hands on my trousers and stood, my knees protesting the movement. The lawn was empty now. The show was over, but the theater remained. My house awaited. I took my time cleaning the tools at the outdoor faucet, drying the blades of the shears with an old cloth. I placed the basket of clippings by the compost bin. Each action was deliberate, a reclaiming of my routine. When I finally opened the back door and stepped into the kitchen, Vanessa was there, as I knew she would be. She sat at the oak table, my glass of iced tea in front of her, condensation pooling on the wood. She had not used a coaster. "Mother," she began, her voice a blend of exasperation and concern. "Why did you do that? You embarrassed me out there." I walked to the sink and washed my hands with plain soap, watching the dirt swirl down the drain. "I was gardening. You were speaking. Those were two separate activities." "They were worried about you." I was explaining the situation. I turned, drying my hands on a dish towel. "You were constructing a situation. The metal bowl, the nighttime wandering. These are specific lies." Her face hardened. The tearful daughter was gone, replaced by the frustrated strategist. "They're not lies, they're illustrative. They represent the kind of thing that's happening, that could happen. You're forgetting things. You're becoming a risk to yourself." "I forgot where I put my reading glasses yesterday," I said, folding the towel and hanging it. "That is not a pathology. It is being 68. "It's a pattern," she insisted, her fingers tapping the table. "You need help. You need someone to manage things. I'm trying to get ahead of a crisis before you hurt yourself or set the house on fire." The cold column inside me grew denser. "And this management, it would involve you having access to my accounts? To the deed?" "Of course," she said, as if it were the most natural conclusion. "I'm your daughter. I have your best interests at heart. A power of attorney is a sensible precaution for your protection." There it was, the objective, stated plainly in my sunlit kitchen. It was not about care. It was about control. I looked at her, this woman I had raised. I saw the impatient set of her jaw, the covetous glance she cast toward the living room, where my grandmother's secretary desk stood. I felt a profound tiredness, but it was not a physical one. "You should go now, Vanessa," I said, my voice quiet. "We need to talk about this. We have talked. You have stated your case. On the lawn and in this kitchen. I have heard it. You should go." She stood up, the chair legs scraping the floor. "You're being stubborn and irrational. This is exactly what I was telling them about." I did not respond. I walked to the front door and opened it. The afternoon light streamed in. I stood beside it, waiting. She snatched her purse from the counter, her movements sharp with anger. She stopped in front of me. "This isn't over, Mother. I will keep you safe, even if you hate me for it." She left. I closed the door. The lock clicked into place with a solid, final sound. I leaned against the wood for a moment, listening to the silence of the house. It was a different silence now, charged and waiting. I went to the phone, an old cordless model on the kitchen wall. I pressed the number I knew by heart. Gloria answered on the second ring. "Ellie?" "She was here," I said. I heard. Gloria's voice was flat, devoid of its usual warmth. "Ben Carter just called me. He was walking his dog. He said Vanessa was putting on a real performance. Said you came out of the garden like a ghost and said something about potato salad. I did. Good. Ben's a good man, but he's impressionable. The potato salad probably confused him more than Vanessa's theatrics. I heard the flick of a lighter, the long exhale of a smoker. Gloria had quit 15 years ago, but she still pretended when she was thinking hard. I'm coming over. You don't have to. I'm not asking. Put the kettle on. 20 minutes later, her old sedan pulled into the driveway. I watched from the window as she got out, a tall, sturdy woman in a bright purple tracksuit. She marched up the walk, not to the front door, but diagonally across my lawn to where Vanessa had held court. She stood there, hands on her hips, scanning the area as if reading invisible traces. Then she gave a firm, single nod and came to the door. I had the tea ready, Earl Grey, in the proper pot with the chipped spout she liked. She came in, kissed my cheek, and sat heavily at the table. All right, she said, pouring tea for both of us without asking. Start from the beginning. What did she say exactly? I recounted the conversation, the fabricated incidents, the mention of a facility, the direct push for a power of attorney. Gloria listened, her face a mask of grim concentration. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she took a sip of tea. She's accelerating, this public move. She's testing the waters, seeing who'll believe her, trying to create facts on the ground. Ben and Linda Lanahan were leaning toward belief, I stated. Linda Lanahan believes any story that comes with drama. Ben believes what he's told until someone smarter tells him otherwise. Gloria set her cup down. She made one mistake, though. What? She mentioned me, said you were pushing me away. A slow, fierce smile spread across Gloria's face. That gives me an opening. An opening for what? To interrupt, she said simply. She wants to have a public conversation about your mental state? Fine. We'll have a public conversation, but we'll change the subject. I felt a flicker of the old worry. I don't want a scene, Gloria. It won't be a scene, it'll be a correction. She leaned forward. Ellie, you have spent 40 years in this neighborhood being the sane one. The one who remembers everyone's birthdays, who has the spare key, who knows which plumber doesn't cheat. You have social capital she can't even comprehend. She thinks she can spend it like cash. We need to remind people it's not for sale. How? By letting me speak, she said. Her eyes were sharp. You stay quiet, you stay dignified. You let me be the one to say what everyone is already thinking, but is too polite to say. They all know Vanessa. They've known her since she was in pigtails throwing tantrums when she didn't get her way. They know her divorce, they know her job troubles. They are not blind. They just need permission to see. I looked into my teacup at the dark liquid. The coldness in my chest was beginning to thaw into something else, something active. What will you say? Gloria finished her tea. I'll know when the time comes, but it will be true, and it will be direct, and it will ruin her little narrative. She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was warm and rough. You are not alone in this. You have an army. It's just an army that wears tracksuits and gardening hats. We need to muster it. She stood up. Don't call her. Don't answer if she calls unless you feel like it. Go about your business. Be seen. Be normal. Let her make the next move. She will. She's impatient. After she left, I cleared the teacups. I wiped the table where Vanessa's glass had left a ring. I then went to my desk in the living room, the old secretary with its many small compartments. I took out my checkbook, my most recent bank statement, and a leather-bound ledger where I recorded all my household expenses. I opened it to the current month. There, in my precise handwriting, was an entry for the groceries, the utility bill, a donation to the library. I turned to the previous month, and the month before that. Line after line of orderly, meticulous records, a document of a sane, managed life. This was my truth. It was not dramatic. It was not performative. It was ink on paper. I closed the ledger. Gloria's words echoed. You have an army. I had not thought of it that way. I had thought of myself as a fortress under siege, but a fortress is a passive thing. An army moves. I sat in the quiet house, the evening light stretching long across the floor. I waited, not with the anxiety of a victim, but with the focused patience of a general. The first skirmish was over. The next phase was coming. And for the first time that day, I felt the faint, steady pulse of something other than hurt or anger. It was the quiet beat of strategy. The quiet of the next 2 days was a strategic one. I followed Gloria's instructions. I went to the grocery store on my usual day. I walked to the post office to mail a letter. I watered the front garden in the morning, visible to anyone passing by. I performed normalcy like a well-rehearsed role, but now with a purpose behind each mundane action. I saw the looks from neighbors, curious, hesitant, sometimes sympathetic. I met them with a calm nod, a brief comment on the weather, nothing more. I did not explain. I did not defend. On the morning of the 3rd day, Gloria called. Council of War today, my house, 1 o'clock. She hung up before I could respond. I arrived at her home at 5 minutes to 1. Her house was a mirror of mine in layout, but where mine was ordered and quiet, hers was a comfortable chaos of bold colors, stacked books, and the constant smell of whatever she had last cooked. She ushered me into the kitchen. 2 other women were already seated at her cluttered table. Irene Watson from across the street and Marjorie Peabody from 3 doors down. Irene, a retired nurse, was stirring a spoon in her teacup with surgical precision. Marjorie, a widow who had lived here even longer than Gloria and I, was sitting very straight, her hands folded on the tablecloth. This was not a casual gathering. The air in the kitchen was thick with unspoken agreement. Sit, Ellie, Gloria said, placing a mug of tea in front of an empty chair. We've been talking. I sat. Irene stopped stirring and looked at me. Her gaze was assessing, professional. Gloria told us about Vanessa's performance. I want you to know, Eleanor, that Ben Carter came to see me after. He was troubled. He said Vanessa's story was convincing, but that you seemed entirely coherent to him. He felt conflicted. Conflict is a sign he's thinking, Gloria said, leaning against the counter. That's good. Marjorie cleared her throat. Her voice was soft, but carried a firm clarity. Vanessa came to see me 2 weeks ago. She brought me some muffins from that expensive bakery. She said she was checking in on the seniors on the block, making sure we were all okay. A faint frown line appeared between her brows. She asked me very specific questions, Eleanor, about how you were managing since your retirement, if you seemed stressed about money, if you ever forgot to take your medications. I told her you were the most capable person I knew. She seemed disappointed by that answer. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. The reconnaissance had begun earlier than I'd realized. Irene nodded. She approached me as well, a month ago in the driveway. She framed it as concern about your cognitive load. Asked if, as a nurse, I'd noticed any signs of confusion or forgetfulness. She mentioned power of attorney, said it was a burden she was preparing to take on for you. Irene's lips pressed into a thin line. I told her I had observed no such signs. I also told her that suggesting a person is incompetent without a medical diagnosis is unethical. She did not like that. She's been laying the groundwork, Gloria stated, voicing the conclusion we had all reached. Softening up the battlefield, getting our opinions, seeing who might be a weak link. The lawn show was her first big offensive. What does she want? Marjorie asked, though her eyes suggested she already knew. The house, the savings, control, I said. My voice sounded flat, even to me. She believes I am an obstacle to resources she feels entitled to. Framing me as incompetent is the cleanest legal path. There was a moment of silence, filled only by the hum of Gloria's refrigerator. The ugliness of it, laid bare in this familiar, sunlit kitchen, was both shocking and clarifying. Irene spoke first. You have documentation, medical records, financial records. Meticulous ones, I said. Good, that is your primary defense. But in a matter like this, perception is a secondary front, and that is where she is currently operating. Irene's nursing background framed everything in tactical terms. We need to counter her narrative not with equal drama, but with overwhelming, quiet credibility. How? I asked. By being unimpeachable witnesses, Marjorie said. We have known you for 40 years. We've seen you raise a child, survive a husband, run a household, and manage a career. We are a community. Our collective memory is evidence. Gloria pushed away from the counter and sat at the table. So we agree. We're officially mustered. She looked at each of us in turn. Irene, you're our medical authority. Marjorie, you're our historical record. I'm the field marshal. She turned to me. And you, Ellie, are the calm center. You do not engage. You do not plead. You simply are. Sane, competent, and surrounded. The plan was not a dramatic counterattack. It was a slow, deliberate tightening of a net. It was the mobilization of a lifetime's worth of trust. What's the first move? I asked. We wait for her next mistake, Gloria said, and we document it. Every conversation any of us has with her from now on, we make a note. Time, date, what was said. Irene, your professional opinion on her attempts to solicit a diagnosis from you is particularly valuable. Marjorie, her visit to you with leading questions is important. Irene nodded. I will write a contemporaneous note today about our conversation a month ago. I'll date it and sign it. I'll do the same, Marjorie said. I felt a surge of something powerful, a feeling so foreign it took me a moment to identify it. It was not hope, exactly. It was solidarity. The cold, isolated column inside me was now buttressed by these 3 pillars of steadfast reality. Thank you, I said. The words were inadequate. Marjorie reached over and patted my hand. This is what neighbors are for, dear. This is how we look after our own. Besides, Irene said, a sharp glint in her eye, I've known Vanessa since she was 5 and tried to fake a stomachache to get out of school. I know her tells. This performance is just a more expensive version. We spent the next hour in practical discussion. We agreed on casual, coordinated visibility. Marjorie would invite me over to help her address envelopes for a charity mailing. Irene would ask me to walk with her in the evenings, a public display of normal activity. Gloria would be the point of communication, the one to gather and relay information. As the meeting broke up and Irene and Marjorie left with determined steps, Gloria began clearing the teacups. You see, she said, not looking at me, you're not just fighting for your house, you're defending this. She gestured around her kitchen, but I knew she meant the web of connections that held our street together. She thinks she's just manipulating an old woman. She doesn't understand she's poking a whole hive. I helped her wash the cups. The warm, soapy water felt real, a tangible anchor. The strategy was set. The army was small, but it was mustered. The waiting was over. Now we were watching, and we were ready. The solidarity of Gloria's kitchen stayed with me as I walked the short distance home. It was a tangible thing, a warmth against the chill of the situation. But warmth alone would not win this. Gloria had called it a council of war. Wars are won with intelligence and evidence. I had an abundance of the latter. I just needed to marshal it. I went directly to my study, a small room off the living room that had once been a formal dining room we never used. It held my books, my comfortable reading chair, and the piece of furniture that was the anchor of my domestic life, my grandmother's cherrywood secretary desk. Its folded lid opened to reveal a world of precise order. I turned on the brass lamp and sat down. The first thing I did was open the bottom right drawer, unlocked. Inside were 3 black archival boxes, labeled clearly in my own hand on the white card slots. Financial, current year, financial. Prior 5 years and tax documents. I lifted out the current year box and set it on the desk. Inside, every paper was sorted by month in labeled folders. I removed the folder for the last complete month. It contained my bank statements, investment summaries, paid utility bills, and property tax receipt. Every transaction in my checkbook register matched the statement. Every deposit was recorded. I had balanced the account to the penny on the first of the month, as I had for 45 years. I flipped through the previous months, all identical, a chronicle of quiet, solvent stability. This was the first weapon. It disproved the narrative of a woman too confused to manage her affairs. A woman on the brink of financial disaster does not have neatly filed quarterly dividend reports. Next, I went to the locked filing cabinet beside the desk. I turned the small key and pulled open the top drawer. Medical. Here, every annual physical report, every specialist consultation, every lab result was in chronological order. My doctor's notes from my checkup 2 months ago were on top. His handwriting was concise. Patient is a 68-year-old female in excellent health, alert, oriented, no cognitive concerns noted, blood work within normal ranges. I had scored perfectly on the brief cognitive screening he administered each year, recalling 3 words after a distraction and drawing a correct clock face. I made a mental note to call his office tomorrow and request a formal copy of that report. I closed the medical drawer and opened the one below it. Personal. This held birth certificates, marriage license, my husband's death certificate, and the will. Our will, which left everything to the other, and upon the second death, to Vanessa. A simple standard document. Seeing it now caused a sharp pain, but I pushed past it. That was a problem for another day. Beside the will was a single, thick, cloth-bound notebook. My journal. It was not a diary of feelings. It was a log. I had started it when Henry died, a way to anchor myself in the routine of days when grief threatened to dissolve time itself. Entries were brief, factual. April 12th, pruned rose bushes. Dinner with Gloria. Called Vanessa, no answer. April 18th, attended library board meeting. Submitted quarterly report. Vanessa visited, stayed for lunch, asked about reverse mortgages. I flipped back. There it was, the visit Marjorie had mentioned. May 3rd, Vanessa brought muffins to Marjorie Peabody. Marjorie called in afternoon, said Vanessa asked probing questions about my health. Concerned. My own handwriting, steady and even, documented the early stages of her campaign. It was all here. Not accusations, but data points. A record of a mind that noticed, remembered, and recorded. I spent the next 2 hours creating a new file. I labeled it Matter of Competence. Into it, I placed photocopies of the most relevant pages, the doctor's notes from the last 3 years, the bank statement cover pages showing consistent balances, the property tax receipts. I did not include the journal entries. They were too personal, and their evidentiary value was different. But I noted their existence and dates on a separate sheet of paper. As I worked, the methodical process calmed me further. This was my element. This was what I had done for decades as a librarian. Organized information, made it accessible, validated its sources. I was building a bibliography of my own sanity. The doorbell rang. I closed the file, placed it back in the drawer, and locked it. I walked to the front door and looked through the peephole. It was Irene Watson holding a small casserole dish. I opened the door. "Irene, come in." "I brought you some chicken and rice. I made too much," she said, stepping inside. Her eyes swept over me, then the house, with a nurse's assessing glance. "How are you holding up?" "I am organized," I said, which was the most accurate answer. A slight smile touched her lips. "Good, that's good." She followed me to the kitchen and set the dish on the counter. I wrote my note, dated and signed. Gloria has a copy. I have the original. She paused. I also took the liberty of calling Dr. Evans' office. I know the head nurse there. I didn't ask for any information, of course. I just mentioned, in the context of our neighborhood watch, caring for our seniors, that we were all so pleased you were in such robust health after your last physical." She agreed completely. I felt a surge of gratitude for Irene's strategic mind. She had reinforced the truth within the very system Vanessa might try to manipulate. "Thank you, Irene. That was proactive." "It's easier to prevent a stain than to remove one," she said simply. She looked toward the study. "You have your documents in order." "I do. Keep them secure, not just locked. Think about a safe deposit box for the originals, or give copies to Gloria." She met my gaze. "If this escalates, she may try to gain physical access to this house to safeguard things. You should be prepared for that." The thought was intrusive and alarming, that my own daughter might attempt to rifle through my home under the guise of protection. But Irene was right. Vanessa's strategy was based on creating a false reality. Controlling the narrative meant controlling the paperwork that contradicted it. "I will take precautions," I said. Irene nodded, satisfied. "I'll let you get back to it. Eat the chicken. It's low sodium." She let herself out. I returned to the study. I looked at the locked filing cabinet, then at my desk. Gloria was right. Vanessa would make a mistake. She was impatient. But Irene was also right. I needed to be ready for a more direct assault. My evidence needed to exist beyond these walls. I opened the matter of competence file again. I would make 2 copies tomorrow, one for Gloria, one for a safe deposit box I had not used in years. The originals would stay here, but hidden somewhere else, somewhere not obvious. The false bottom of the old blanket chest in my bedroom occurred to me. The work was tedious. It was administrative. It was the opposite of the dramatic tears on the lawn. But as I stacked the papers, each one a brick in a wall of fact, I felt a grim satisfaction. Vanessa was building a case on smoke and mirrors. I was building mine on granite. And now I had witnesses to the foundation. The copies were made. One set went to Gloria's fireproof box. The other resided in my safe deposit box downtown, alongside my mother's pearls and the deed to the house. The originals, following Irene's advice, were no longer in the filing cabinet. They were sealed in a large waterproof envelope and placed beneath the folded linens in the blanket chest, under the false bottom that had once hidden Henry's father's whiskey bottles during Prohibition. The cabinet was now a decoy, containing only outdated tax returns and blank stationery. I felt a certain grim practicality in the maneuver. The trap, as Gloria devised it, was simple. It relied on Vanessa's impatience and her belief in her own narrative. I had a routine, long established, of visiting the public library on Thursday mornings. Gloria would often join me. This was common knowledge. "We'll make it known," Gloria said over the phone the night before. "I'll mention it to Linda Lanahan at the mailboxes today, that you've got a specialist appointment afterward, something vague, neurological. She'll tell everyone." "Won't that feed into her story?" I asked. "It's misdirection. If she thinks you're out being tested for the very thing she's accusing you of, she'll see an opportunity. She'll think you're vulnerable, that the net is closing. She'll move to secure what she thinks are the assets, and she'll do it when she believes the house is empty." So, on Thursday morning, we performed our normal ritual. We left my house together at 9:30, got into Gloria's car, and drove toward the library. We waved at Marjorie, who was watering her petunias. We turned the corner. Then Gloria drove 2 blocks over and parked behind the community center. We sat in silence for 5 minutes. Then she drove back, circling to approach my house from the opposite direction, and parked a street over, where we had a clear line of sight to my driveway through a gap between the Millers and the Carters' houses. We waited. Gloria had brought binoculars. I had brought a book. The normality of reading in a parked car while waiting to catch my daughter in an act of betrayal was a dissonance I simply accepted. At 10:17, Vanessa's silver sedan turned onto the street. It pulled into my driveway. She got out, dressed in the same kind of competent woman attire she'd worn for the lawn performance. She was not alone. A man in a uniform shirt with a logo on the pocket followed her, carrying a heavy toolbox. "Locksmith," Gloria murmured, lowering the binoculars. Right on schedule. We watched as Vanessa took out her key, unlocked my front door, and ushered the man inside. The door closed behind them. "Give it 5 minutes," Gloria said, her voice tight with anger. "Let her commit." The 5 minutes were the longest of my life. I watched the closed door of my own home. I imagined her leading the man to the study, pointing at the filing cabinet, explaining that her confused mother had locked away important documents and lost the key, that she needed access for her mother's own good. The performance would be for the locksmith's benefit. "Now," Gloria said. We got out of the car and walked briskly down the sidewalk, not trying to hide our approach. We turned up my walkway. Gloria did not ring the bell. She took out her own key, the one I had given her 20 years ago for emergencies, and unlocked the door. We stepped inside. The sound of drilling came from the study, a high, grinding whine. We walked down the hallway. The door to the study was open. Vanessa stood with her back to us, watching the locksmith work on the cabinet's lock. "Just a few more seconds," the man said, his voice muffled by concentration. "Take your time," Vanessa said. "It's crucial we get these documents secured today." "I believe they already are," I said. Vanessa whirled around. Her face went through a rapid series of transformations. Shock, panic, then a frantic attempt to reassemble her mask of concerned authority. The locksmith started and turned, looking embarrassed. "Mother! Gloria! What are you doing here? Your appointment—" "Concluded early," Gloria said, her arms crossed. She looked at the locksmith. "You can stop drilling now, sir. There's been a misunderstanding." The man straightened up, wiping his hands on his pants. He looked from Vanessa's pale face to my calm one. "Ma'am, she said you were incapacitated and she needed access to your legal papers. She had a key to the house." "She does," I said. "She is my daughter. I am not incapacitated. I did not request this service. This is my property." I kept my voice level, factual. "What is your company's policy on verifying authority before forcing locks on private property?" The locksmith's expression shifted to deep discomfort. "We usually take the requesting party at their word if they have access to the premises. But this is awkward." He started packing his tools with hurried movements. "I'm not getting in the middle of a family thing. There'll be no charge." He wanted nothing more than to leave. Vanessa found her voice. It was shrill. "Mother, you don't understand. I'm trying to protect you. These documents are vulnerable. You could misplace them, or someone could take advantage." "Who, Vanessa?" I interrupted. My tone was not loud, but it cut through her panic. "Who would take advantage? You are the only one here with a locksmith, attempting to break into my filing cabinet without my knowledge or consent." The words "break into" hung in the air. The locksmith winced, slung his toolbox over his shoulder, and edged toward the hallway. "I'll just see myself out." "Wait," Vanessa called, but he was already gone. We heard the front door open and close. The three of us stood in the study. The air was thick with the smell of metal dust from the drilled lock. The cabinet was marred, a raw scratch around the keyhole. Vanella's breath was coming fast. "You set me up." "You walked into it," Gloria said. "We went for a drive. You brought a stranger into your mother's house to violate her property. That's not a setup. That's a fact." "I have a right." Vanessa's composure shattered. "I am your next of kin. I have a responsibility." "You have no rights to my property while I am alive and of sound mind," I said. I walked to the damaged cabinet. "You have no responsibility that I have given you. You have only avarice, and now you have been witnessed acting upon it." She stared at me, her eyes wide. The performance was gone. What remained was raw, exposed ambition, and the dawning realization that her plan was not just failing, but backfiring. "They'll believe me. I'll tell them you're paranoid, that you're hiding things." "You can tell them whatever you like," Gloria said. "We'll tell them what we saw today. And we'll have the receipt from the locksmith company, which I just wrote down from his shirt. I'm sure they'll have a record of the call, a call I'm guessing you made from your own phone." Vanessa's hand went to her pocket, where her phone was, as if it were suddenly hot. She had no retort. The evidence was no longer about my mental state. It was about her actions, concrete, witnessed, and illegal. "You need to leave now," I said. I felt nothing looking at her. No anger, no hurt, just a cold, clear certainty. "Do not return unless I invite you. If you do, I will call the police and report this attempted breaking and entering. I have a witness." I gestured to Gloria, gestured to. Vanella took a step back, then another. The rage and humiliation on her face were pure and undisguised. She turned and walked quickly down the hall. The front door opened and slammed shut with a force that shook the windows. Gloria let out a long, slow breath. Well, that escalated. I looked at the damaged lock. Yes, it did. The line had been crossed. The conflict was no longer a war of words. It was a matter of record. And for the first time, the record was unequivocally on my side. The slammed door echoed through the house, a period at the end of her sentence. Gloria and I stood in the study for a moment, listening to the silence that followed. The smell of drilled metal lingered. "I'll call the locksmith company tomorrow," Gloria said, her voice practical. "Get a copy of the service request, confirm it was her." I nodded. The immediate tactical work was done. The larger social consequence was now out of my hands and in the hands of the neighborhood. I understood that this was the true turning point. The law might be slow, but community judgment is swift. The news traveled as such news does in a close-knit street, not in a single broadcast, but through a dozen quiet conversations. Gloria was the primary vector. She did not shout it from the porch. She made phone calls to Irene, to Marjorie, to Ben Carter, because he had been a witness to the first act and deserved to know the second. Her script was factual and brief. "Vanessa tried to hire a locksmith to break into Ellie's filing cabinet today. We caught her in the act. The locksmith left. Ellie is fine." By the next morning, the information had metabolized. I saw its effects in the small public spaces of our daily lives. I went to the grocery store on Friday, as was my habit. In the produce aisle, I saw Linda Lanahan examining green beans. She saw me, offered a tight, sympathetic smile, and then quickly looked away, her cheeks flushing slightly. She was embarrassed, not for me, but for having initially believed Vanessa's performance. She moved to the other end of the aisle without speaking. At the checkout, Mrs. Miller from the new couple was behind me in line. She leaned forward slightly. "Eleanor, I just wanted to say, we're all thinking of you." Her voice was low. "It's just awful." She didn't specify what it was. She didn't need to. "Thank you," I said, my tone neutral. "The hydrangeas are doing well this year." She blinked, then nodded, understanding the subject was closed. Yes, they are. The true masterpiece of social censure occurred at the post office on Saturday. I needed stamps. As I approached the small building, I saw Vanessa's car in the lot. She was coming out the door as I was going in. We met on the steps. She looked tired, her stylish clothes slightly rumpled. She held a padded envelope. She stopped, her body tense, expecting a confrontation. I merely nodded. "Vanessa." She opened her mouth, perhaps to say something defensive, but was interrupted. Old Mr. Peterson, who lived at the end of the street and had been the neighborhood's de facto grandfather for 30 years, was coming up the steps behind me. He moved slowly with his cane. He saw Vanessa. His normally twinkling eyes grew serious. "Vanessa Carter," he said, his voice a gravelly baritone. He did not smile. "Hello, Mr. Peterson," she said, her voice artificially bright. He stopped, leaning on his cane. He looked at her for a long moment, his gaze steady. "I've known you since you were a little girl riding your bike with training wheels on this sidewalk," he said. The preamble was gentle, but his next words were not. "I hear you're having a hard time. Family trouble can do that to a person, make them act in ways they later regret." Vanella's face froze. "I'm not sure what you've heard, Mr. Peterson, but I've heard enough." he said, not unkindly, but with a firmness that brooked no argument. "I just want to ask you, as someone who watched you grow up, are you all right, child? Because you're not acting like yourself." The question, delivered with paternal concern, was a devastating weapon. It framed her actions not as malicious, but as a sign of her own distress. It removed her moral high ground and placed her under a microscope of pity. It was a public suggestion that she was the one who was unwell. Her jaw tightened. The color drained from her face. "I'm perfectly fine, just looking out for my mother." Mr. Peterson nodded slowly, as if he didn't believe her. He then turned to me, his expression warming. "Eleanor, my dear, you look well. The garden is a triumph this year." He completely shifted the conversation, excluding her. "Thank you, Arthur. The lilies are about to bloom. I'll save some cuttings for you." "I'd like that." He gestured for me to go ahead of him into the post office. "After you." I walked inside. I did not look back at Vanessa. I heard her footsteps, quick and sharp, descending the steps to the parking lot. At the counter, Mr. Peterson leaned close and said in a low voice, "Gloria filled me in. Nasty business. You let me know if you need anything. A porch light left on. A watchful eye." He was offering the neighborhood watch, literally and figuratively. "I will, Arthur. Thank you." This was the chorus of side eyes Gloria had predicted. It was not loud. It was not violent. It was a quiet, uniform withdrawal of social credit. It was the grocery store avoidance, the pitying looks, the pointed questions that carried the weight of decades of shared history. Vanessa was no longer a tragic heroine caring for her declining mother. She was a woman who had been caught doing something underhanded, and worse, she had done it to Eleanor Beaumont, who had helped sign their children's report cards, who had brought soup when they were sick, who remembered their anniversaries. Her isolation was not declared, it simply manifested. I saw her car drive down the street later that day, moving slowly as if looking for a friendly wave from a lawn. Ben Carter, mowing his grass, saw her and gave a single curt nod before turning his back to adjust the mower. Marjorie, sitting on her porch, picked up her newspaper and held it open, creating a wall of newsprint. Vanessa's world had shrunk to the interior of her car and the four walls of her apartment. The community she had tried to manipulate into being her weapon had instead become my shield. And a shield, when moved with purpose, can also be a blunt instrument. The social consequences were in full effect. Every silent rebuke was a brick in the wall she had tried to build around me. Now, she was on the wrong side of it. The social silence that had fallen around Vanessa was a tangible force. It was not my doing, not directly, but the consequence of actions witnessed and judged by a community with a long memory. I continued my routines, and now the glances I received were different, less of pity, more of solidarity, often accompanied by a small, firm nod. The neighborhood had chosen its side. It was a form of protection, but I knew it was not a permanent solution. Social pressure could isolate her, but it could not legally restrain her. For that, I needed a different kind of authority. Gloria came over on Monday morning, a business card held between her fingers like a winning ticket. "Janice James," she said, placing it on my kitchen table. Her mother and I were in the sorority. Janice is a partner at James and Lowe. Estate law, elder law, litigation. She's sharp. She doesn't suffer fools. I called her. "She can see you tomorrow at 10. I picked up the card. The font was crisp, modern. Janice L. James, esque. "Thank you, Gloria." "Don't thank me yet. She'll ask you direct questions. You give her direct answers and bring your file." She meant the matter of competence on file. This moves us from the porch to the courtroom, figuratively speaking. The next day, Gloria drove me downtown. Ms. James's office was in a sleek building of glass and steel, a world away from my tree-lined street. The reception area was quiet, furnished in neutral tones. A young assistant led us to a corner office with a view of the river. Janice James stood up from behind a wide, minimalist desk. She was younger than I expected, perhaps in her late 40s, with intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses and hair cut in a severe, elegant bob. She wore a tailored suit. She shook my hand, then Gloria's. Her grip was firm. "Mrs. Beaumont, Mrs. Johnson, please have a seat." Her voice was clear and economical. "Gloria has given me a brief overview. I've also taken the liberty of reviewing the basic public records. Your deed, your voter registration, all in order. Now, I'd like to hear it from you in your own words." I opened the file I had brought and placed it on her desk. This is a summary. It includes my recent medical reports, financial summaries, and a timeline of events beginning with my daughter Vanessa's initial attempts to question my neighbors about my competence, culminating in an incident last Thursday where she hired a locksmith to force the lock on my home filing cabinet. Mrs. Johnson and I witnessed it. Ms. James opened the file. She scanned the documents with a practiced eye, spending extra time on the doctor's note and the bank statements. She then read the single-page timeline I had typed. She looked up. "This is exceptionally well organized. It makes my job easier." She closed the file. "Your daughter is attempting to build a case for your incapacity, likely to petition for guardianship or conservatorship. This would give her control over your assets and person. The locksmith incident is a gift. It demonstrates overt, actionable intent that undermines her claim of benevolent concern." "What can be done?" I asked. "Several things. We can be proactive or reactive. Reactive would mean waiting for her to file a petition with the court, then defending against it with this evidence. That is a defensive posture. It is stressful, costly, and leaves the initiative with her." "And the proactive approach?" Gloria asked. Ms. James steepled her fingers. "We take the initiative from her. We make it legally clear that her narrative is false and her actions are unwelcome. I recommend a multi-step approach. First, a cease and desist letter from my office detailing her actions, the defamatory statements to neighbors, the attempted unauthorized entry, and demanding she stop all contact regarding your personal and financial affairs. Second, we immediately revoke any existing power of attorney or healthcare proxy she may hold and execute new documents naming a different trusted agent. Third, we formally notify all your financial and medical institutions of this change with copies of the new documents and instruct them that she is not to be given any information." The clarity of it was bracing. This was no longer about neighborhood whispers. This was about legal paperwork, notifications, and boundaries etched in ink. "Who would I name as agent?" I asked. I looked at Gloria. "Not me," Gloria said immediately. "I'm your best friend, which makes me look biased. It should be someone neutral, unimpeachable. Irene Watson. She's a retired medical professional. Her credibility is stainless." "Ms. James nodded. "An excellent suggestion. Mrs. Watson's professional background would carry significant weight if challenged." "And my will?" The question felt cold, but it was necessary. "We can discuss amending that as well, though that is a separate instrument. The immediate priority is to secure your present autonomy. The cease and desist letter is our first shot across the bow. It puts her on formal notice that her behavior has been observed, documented, and will be met with legal consequences if continued. It often stops these campaigns in their tracks." I considered the options. The reactive path felt like wading in a trench for an assault. The proactive path was moving my own lines forward onto ground of my choosing. We proceed with the proactive approach, all of it. A slight approving smile touched Ms. James's lips. "Very well. I will draft the cease and desist letter today. I will need Mrs. Watson's contact information and her consent. You will need to sign the new durable power of attorney and healthcare proxy forms. I recommend we send the letter via certified mail. The paper trail is important." "What will the letter do?" I asked. "It will frighten her," Ms. James said plainly. "It translates social disapproval into legal risk. It informs her that you are not a helpless target. You are a client with representation. It changes the entire calculus. She stood up, signaling the meeting was concluding. You have made the correct choice, Mrs. Beaumont. Protection is not just about hiding behind walls. It is about clearly defining where your property line lies and what will happen to those who trespass. In the car going home, Gloria was quiet for a while. Then she said, Janice is good. She doesn't mess around. No, I agreed, looking out at the city shifting back into suburbs. The cold column within me had been joined by something new, a framework. The emotional hurt, the social battle. These were now encased within a structure of legal fact. The law was a slow, dry machine, but it was a machine that ran on documents like the ones in my file. I had provided the fuel. Now Ms. James would start the engine. The first product would be a letter on firm, expensive paper. I found I was looking forward to its arrival, not at my house, but at Vanessa's. The formal consequence was now in motion. The legal machinery was in motion. Ms. James's office drafted the documents. Irene Watson, when I called her, agreed without hesitation to be my agent. It's an honor, Eleanor, and a necessity, she said, her voice firm. I signed the new powers of attorney in Miss James's presence. The cease and desist letter was printed, signed, and placed in a certified mail envelope. Its journey had begun, but in the interim there was a social front to reinforce. The law would speak in due time. The neighborhood was speaking now, and we decided to amplify that conversation. We're having a party, Gloria announced on Friday morning. A porch party, tomorrow evening, casual. Everyone brings a dish. You provide lemonade and iced tea. It was not a question. A party, I repeated. A demonstration, she corrected. We show the street and anyone else who might be watching that you are not a recluse in a decaying house. You are a beloved member of a community that is carrying on, happily, without drama. We reclaim the narrative on your own porch. So we prepared. I did not obsess. I made lemonade from scratch, the way my mother taught me, with real lemons and just the right amount of sugar. I brewed sun tea in a large glass jar on the back steps. Gloria brought over folding chairs and 2 small tables. We did not decorate beyond a simple checkered cloth on the food table. The invitations were verbal and swift. Gloria, Irene, and Marjorie were the apostles. They called. They stopped by. They spread the word along the street's informal network. Eleanor's having a little porch gathering tomorrow, 5 p.m. Bring something if you can. On Saturday evening, as the heat of the day began to soften into a golden twilight, they came. Not everyone, but a strong representation. Ben Carter and his wife brought a pasta salad. The Millers came with a store-bought pie, looking earnest. Linda Lanahan arrived with a plate of deviled eggs, her earlier embarrassment seemingly set aside. Marjorie brought her famous cornbread. Irene brought a platter of crudités that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Old Mr. Peterson came slowly up the walk, carrying a bottle of ginger ale. They filled the porch, the steps, and spilled onto the lawn in little clusters. The air filled with the comfortable murmur of long acquaintance, talk of gardens, grandchildren, the upcoming block party, the new paving on Elm Street. Laughter, genuine and unforced, punctuated the conversations. I moved among them, pouring lemonade, offering tea. I accepted compliments on the hydrangeas. I listened to Ben's story about his dog's latest antics. I thanked Mrs. Miller for the pie. The role of hostess was one I knew well, a familiar skin to inhabit. Tonight it was also a uniform. Gloria held court in a rocking chair, holding a glass of iced tea like a scepter. "See?" she said to me in a low voice as I refilled her glass. "This is the truth. This is your life, not her fantasy of decline." I saw the truth of it in their faces. There was no pity here tonight. There was solidarity and a quiet, collective celebration of a norm that had been threatened. My porch was not a stage for a tragedy. It was a platform for continuity. It was during a lull, as the sun dipped below the roof lines and the string lights Gloria had insisted on began to glow, that I saw it. A silver sedan drove slowly down the street. It did not stop. It did not speed up. It just crept past my house. Every head on the porch seemed to turn, not obviously, but in a series of slight adjustments. Conversations paused for half a second, then resumed, a little louder. Ben Carter let out a robust laugh at nothing in particular. Gloria raised her glass in a mock toast toward the street. The car continued to the end of the block, turned, and was gone. The message had been delivered, not by certified mail, but by the sight of 20 people laughing on my lawn, by the glow of lights, by the palpable evidence of a community intact. She had been erased from the picture, and the picture was one of unabated joy. Later, as people began to leave with hugs and promises to do it again soon, Irene helped me carry empty plates inside. "That was effective," she said, rinsing a dish in my sink. "It was," I agreed. It had been a display of social health, as deliberate and potent as the medical report in my file. "The letter goes out Monday," Irene said. This was the soft power. That will be the hard power. I looked out the kitchen window at the darkened porch, the empty chairs. The party was over. The show of force was complete. The silence that followed was no longer the silence of isolation, but the quiet of a battlefield after a decisive victory on one front. The next engagement would be legal, impersonal, and arrive in a small, flat envelope. But for tonight, the porch had spoken, and its testimony was irrefutable. The party dishes were washed, the leftover food put away. The social demonstration was complete. On Monday morning, the legal operation entered its final phase. Gloria drove me to Ms. James's office one last time. The documents were ready for final review. The cease and desist letter was a full page of precise, uncompromising text. It listed, in bullet points, Vanessa's actions, the defamatory statements made to neighbors on a specified date, the attempt to solicit a false diagnosis from Irene Watson, the hiring of a locksmith to forcibly enter a locked cabinet on a specified date, witnessed by Eleanor Beaumont and Gloria Johnson. It stated that these actions constituted harassment, attempted trespass, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It demanded that she cease and desist all contact regarding my personal, medical, and financial affairs. It informed her that all powers of attorney previously held by her were revoked, and new instruments were in effect, naming Irene Watson as agent. It concluded by stating that any further communication must be directed to this law office. I read it slowly. It was dry, clinical, and devastating. "It's accurate," I said. "It is," Ms. James agreed. "We are also including, as an attachment, signed declarations from Gloria Johnson and Irene Watson summarizing their witness accounts. This is not a bluff. It is a documented file." I signed where she indicated, authorizing her to send it. She then presented the new durable power of attorney and healthcare proxy documents for my signature. I signed them, and Irene, who had come separately, signed as the designated agent. The process was silent, efficient. "The letter and copies of the new documents will be sent via certified mail with return receipt requested today," Ms. James said. "I will also send formal notification letters to your bank, your investment firm, and your primary care physician with copies of the new powers, instructing them to update their records and deny any requests for information from your daughter. The paper trail will be complete." Gloria handed Ms. James a list of the financial institutions and the doctor's contact information we had prepared. "Thank you, Janice." "It's my job," Ms. James said, but her expression held a glint of professional satisfaction. "You have done the hard work, Mrs. Beaumont. You gathered the evidence. You secured the witnesses. My role is merely to translate that into the language the system understands." She handed me a copy of the tracking number for the certified letter. "You can follow its progress online. It will likely be delivered tomorrow or the day after." We drove home. The atmosphere in the car was one of quiet exhaustion, the kind that follows a long and difficult task seen through to its end. "It's done," Gloria said. The action is done, I corrected. The consequence is pending. I checked the tracking number that evening. The letter had been processed at the Central Post Office. I did not check again until the following afternoon. The status updated, available for pickup. Vanessa had not been home to receive it. She would have a slip in her mailbox informing her a certified letter awaited her at the post office. She would have to go and sign for it. I imagined her seeing the law firm's return address, the dread that would curdle in her stomach. The next update came at 3:17 p.m. Delivered, individual signed. She had picked it up. She had opened it. My phone rang at 4:05. The screen flashed Vanessa. I let it ring 3 times, then answered. I did not speak. Her voice was a strained wire, high and thin. How could you? A cease and desist? Against your own daughter? This is monstrous. I waited for the torrent to slow. The letter outlines documented facts, I said, my voice calm. It establishes necessary boundaries. Boundaries? You've cut me out. You've given a stranger power over your life. This is exactly the kind of irrational, paranoid decision I was trying to prevent. Irene Watson is not a stranger. She is my chosen agent. The decision was reviewed and executed by my attorney. These are the actions of a rational person. She made a choked sound. They made statements, Gloria and Irene. They lied. They attested to what they saw and heard. The locksmith company has a record of your service request. These are not lies, they are evidence. I kept each sentence short, factual, a brick in the wall she could not scale. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear her ragged breathing. When she spoke again, the anger had deflated, replaced by something hollow. You win. Is that what you want to hear? You've turned everyone against me. You've lawyered up. You win. This was not a game to be won, Vanessa, I said, and for the first time a sliver of old sadness pierced the coldness. It was an assault to be stopped. It has been stopped. So what now? The question was a whisper. Now, you live with the consequences of your actions. If you need to contact me regarding a genuine family matter, you may do so. All communication regarding my well-being or my affairs will be handled by Ms. James's office. That is the new reality. She did not say goodbye. The line went dead. I placed the phone on the table. The silence in my house was absolute. I felt no triumph. I felt a profound, weary finality. The legal letter had done its job. It had formalized the defeat. It had translated the social exile into a permanent, legal status. She was now, in the eyes of every relevant institution, a party to be managed, not a trusted next of kin. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been codified. The reckoning had arrived, not with a shout, but with the quiet thud of certified mail on a countertop. The silence after that phone call was not an empty one. It was a space that had been cleared. The following weeks were quiet. I resumed the rhythms of my life without the underlying tension of an impending battle. I tended my garden as summer began its slow turn toward fall. The roses put out a final, determined bloom. The hydrangeas deepened to a dusty purple. It was on a Tuesday afternoon, the air holding the first hint of crispness, that I saw her car again. It did not speed past. It pulled to the curb in front of my house and stopped. I was kneeling by the late-blooming asters, my hands buried in the cool soil. I watched as Vanessa got out. She was not dressed for a performance. She wore simple jeans and a sweater. She looked smaller. She stood by her car for a moment, then walked up the path. She carried nothing but a small, flat object wrapped in brown paper. She stopped a few feet from where I worked. "Mother," she said. Her voice was not tearful or demanding. It was quiet. I sat back on my heels, wiping my hands on a cloth beside me. "Vanessa." She held out the wrapped object. "I was going through some things. I found this. It belongs here." I took it. I unwrapped the paper. It was a framed photograph, one I had not seen in years. It was of the three of us, Henry, a much younger Vanessa, and me, taken at a long-ago picnic. We were smiling, squinting against the sun. It had hung in the hallway for a decade before disappearing during one of her visits after Henry's death. I had assumed it was packed away somewhere. I now understood she had taken it, a small piece of the life she felt entitled to. "Thank you," I said, setting it carefully on the garden bench. She stood there, her hands now empty, unsure what to do with them. She looked at the asters, at the house, anywhere but directly at me. The letter. I understand it. I don't like it, but I understand it. I waited. This was not an apology. It was an acknowledgement. It was more than I expected and all I would get. "Would you like a glass of lemonade?" I asked. She blinked, startled by the ordinary question. She nodded. "Yes, thank you." I stood a bit stiffly and led the way to the porch. I gestured to the rocking chair. She sat. I went inside, washed my hands thoroughly at the sink, and poured 2 glasses from the pitcher in the refrigerator. The normalcy of the action was its own kind of power. I returned, handed her a glass, and sat in the adjacent chair. We drank in silence for a moment, looking out at the garden she had tried to use as a stage. "What happens now?" she finally asked, echoing her phone question, but the tone was different. Defeated, not defiant. "Now, we live separately," I said. "You have your life, I have mine. You are my daughter. That biological fact remains. But the trust that defined our relationship is broken. It may or may not be rebuilt, but that will take years, and it will require a consistent demonstration of respect. It will not involve discussions of my finances, my health, or my home." She absorbed this, her fingers tracing the condensation on her glass. "And if I need you, you may call. If it is a genuine need, I will listen. But I will not be manipulated. I will not be used. The legal boundaries are in place to protect us both from further misunderstandings." "You don't trust me at all," she stated. "No," I said plainly. "I do not. You forfeited that trust. You must earn it back through actions, not words. And you must understand that it may never return to what it was. That is the consequence." She nodded slowly, a look of grim comprehension on her face. The fantasy was fully dissolved. The mother, who could be maneuvered, who could be gaslit and controlled, did not exist. Before her was the real woman, clear-eyed and unbending, offering lemonade on a porch that was irrevocably hers. "I should go," she said, placing the half-finished glass on the small table between us. "That is your choice." She stood. She looked at me, and for a fleeting second I saw the ghost of the little girl from the photograph, confused and in over her head. Then it was gone. "Goodbye, Mother. Goodbye, Vanessa." She walked back down the path, got into her car, and drove away. She did not look back. I finished my lemonade. I picked up the photograph, carried it inside, and placed it on the hall table where it had once hung. It was a piece of the past to be remembered, but not a blueprint for the future. I returned to the garden. There were still asters to be planted before the frost. The work was simple, physical, and mine alone. The soil accepted the roots, and I pressed it firm around them. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows. The house behind me was quiet, secure, and entirely my own. The war was over. The peace that remained was on my terms, hard-won and bounded by truth. I picked up my trowel and continued to plant.